Good. Good evening to those of you who are present, those of you who are online. I can see online our friend De Stijl, who is one of the big brains behind this opus, which together we are going to shortly present with Bruno Lieberberg. Let me give you a few words of introduction about this thick book, which, as is the tradition in the Paris Peace Forum, identifies a problem of a global nature that we believe needs to be worked out. That's stage one. Then proposes solutions in order to address this problem. And then in stage three, tries to move these solutions forward so that at least some of them become reality. So we are at the end of stage two, on the eve of stage three. Stage one is way behind us, sort of 2 years ago, when Bruno Lieberberg, who heads the Center for European Regulation in Brussels, which is both a cooperative, a think tank, and a do tank, which started many years ago when he was young, well, more younger, let's say, still way younger than I am, even at the time, and that hasn't changed really, when he decided that there needed to be a place in Europe where utilities and those who regulate these utilities talk together, work together, in a way that influence of corporates on regulators or regulators on corporates is recognized but not worked in this place. Started with energy, started with other utilities, now very much in digital. Bruno might want to recall this. Both of us at the time, and discussing with Adrien Abécassis, who is with us tonight and who is the guy who leads the policy department of the Paris Peace Forum, that was 2 years ago, thought, well, we might soon have a problem with the fragmentation of digital ecosystems. Given what we smell is happening in this sector, given the way geopolitics are switching, we probably will have a problem. And we decided to investigate this problem. Basically, will digital ecosystems in the future converge or diverge? And this is a fundamental problem according to us, and we thought it was the case at the time, because digitalization is the way this world will go. And if in a world which is already incredibly divided north-south and east-west, and we just attended a conversation between the French Republic and a number of heads of state and government on why is it so, what should we do? Then, if digitalization fragments, we will have a more divided north-south and east-west world. That led us to use our brains and the brains of a number of extremely good experts who, for most of them, belong to the CERRE network. And we decided to investigate the issue of whether digital ecosystems would converge or diverge in a number of specific areas: infrastructures, platforms, data, and digital trade, which were the areas at the time we identified as the ones where this convergence, divergence game would play. probably in different proportions. And then once we structured this, we looked at a number of possible partners that would fund this big work, because neither the Paris Peace Forum nor the CERRE had the resources, the deep pockets to do that. We succeeded in doing so in conditions which Bruno will recall. And then we mandated 4 big academic brains to lead 4 big academic investigations into these 4 areas, hence the thickness of this report. They worked hard, we worked with them, and then after we benefited from their academic input, knowledge, science, we clubbed them together with us, and we decided to go to phase 2, which is to try and identify a number of recommendations, which you will find in this report as the result of this big brain juice exercise leading to innovations, new ventures, new ideas, in order to try and find solution to the problem we had identified. So today is about phase 2, airing for the first time on the occasion of the Paris Peace Forum the ideas, the recommendations that came out of this big brain juice exercise. Once we've done that today, what will start is phase 3, but that's for later. Bruno.
Thank you very much, Pascal. It's clear that the report that we're publishing today is an important contribution to the understanding of what makes globalization work and what are the major obstacles that we are facing. First of all, I just would like to emphasize the original character of the process, because I think it's the first time that we can have a group of some 30 experts, academics, high level, from Europe, the US, China, and a number of other countries in the world around the table and trying to look together at something which initially or fundamentally may divide them and where they may have different perspectives. However, we managed to get together and to come up with this baby, which is thick, but where eventually we didn't have anybody who would, around the table, have a major problem with any of the many recommendations that we're making. Now, as Pascal said, and we did this, of course, this is important, this is a totally independent piece of work. We worked, as we do within our think tank, the Center on Regulation in Europe, CERRE, in full independence. And basically, we came to a number of recommendations. And the first one, which I think is the most significant one, and that is that in times where we see that after a very profound period of growth of the digital ecosystems, with all the benefits that this has been leading to, we see that because of the realization of a number of issues generated by the ecosystems and the operations of the ecosystems, states want to take back control and want to regulate. Well, we see that against that background, what we are living today is a period of divergence, a period where we can even talk about decoupling. For instance, decoupling of the US and China, technological decoupling. So against that background, how can we try to devise a system where convergence of rules, convergence of governance can be promoted? And if that is not, if convergence is not possible, for reasons which, by the way, may be totally legitimate, and I'll come back to that, how can we try to organize coexistence? These have been the research questions that this group of academics and experts have been trying to address. And what we realized is that clearly, as I said a minute ago, a full comprehensive convergence is not necessarily something which would be realistic, nor in many instances appropriate. Because when we talk about digital ecosystems, we talk about something which is different from, and Pascal used to say it already some time ago, we're not dealing with digital issues as we're dealing with trade in shoes or trade in steel. And that is because basically when you talk about digital, you talk about something which is connotated, and it's connotated by our values, by our collective choices. And we may not necessarily share the same values across the world. We may have, but we may have the same values or share a number of similar values between Europe and the United States. But do we share on everything the same interests? Similar with China, Europe may not necessarily share the same values on many issues. Let's talk data. Data for us in Europe, data is something which is related to privacy, to the defense of our personal identity. It's all things. The data in an American perspective may more likely be considered as a merchandise. And in China, data may be, some people may say that data is a way for the dominant party to control its citizens. What I'm saying is that we try to go over all that and see what we could do to move, to try to have a system which can feature four objectives: the objective of efficiency, the objective of compatibility, of resilience, and of coherence. Coherence between the rules, compatibility between the rules, efficiency of the rules. And we developed that. And we came to a number of recommendations which basically meet those objectives. You will see them in the executive summary that you have in front of you, and you have the link to the full report. One of the things that I would like to feature, because it's extremely original, it's our proposal or recommendation to establish a digital stability board. You know, the digital stability board that we have in mind is something which would work on a similar base to the financial stability board, which was established at the outcome of the 2008 crisis. And it would gather a very broad set of stakeholders. And I think it's interesting to see that what we are saying here echoes what has just been discussed in the previous session with President Macron and his distinguished guests. A broad set of stakeholders. And these stakeholders should not only be representatives from national governments, but also regional institutions, also regulators, regulatory agencies, also consumer protection organizations, finance, industry. We think that the stakeholders should be present in the digital stability boards. The think tanks, and relevant NGOs. And the mandate of that body, which would be established by the G20 and would report to the G20, would be to identify, observe, monitor technological and regulatory developments and business practices, new business models, and try to identify what are the vulnerabilities, what are the issues where government and regulators' responses are needed. It would also identify risks, detect issues where policy choices have to be made, but it would not be a decision-making body. It would report, say, annually to the G20, with the hope that the deliverables of the Digital Stability Board could inform the choices, the decisions that would have to be made by governments. So we think, and that's something that Pascal and I co-signed, we think that globalization with firewalls is not an option. It's not an option which would benefit neither citizens nor the economy. And we think that we appreciate the difficulty of the exercise. We appreciate the difficulty of trying to find a set of solutions which accommodate the conflicting objectives of growth, competition, fair and stable organizations, national security, and ethics. Again, something which was addressed, I think, and underlined in the previous session with the President. We basically think that we need global, well-regulated, dense exchange flows of data, of digital technology, and we think that this is essential if the world wants to preserve scientific progress, if we want to increase even further the speed of innovation, and as such provides answers, optimal responses to the major global challenges such as development, climate change, health, and inequalities. And finally, what we say, and I think which is very much beyond our initiative and our purpose in doing this and launching this and co-leading it, Pascal and I, is that while our recommendations are certainly not exhaustive, we hope that they could provide a valuable contribution towards what could eventually be a new world digital order. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruno. Let me add one word before we go to questions, which is about the paramentality of this set of work and recommendations with the Paris Peace Forum. The starting point is the same. This world is divided, and these divisions are increasing, and we need to do better at international cooperation. Same starting point, same conclusion in the recommendations, which you will see, that a large part of what we need to do will not be done by states. They have to keep the privilege of regulation, because this is where sovereignty lies, this is where legitimacy lies, whatever the modalities are for this legitimacy, and we know that they are diverse on our planet. But in these fragmentations, divisions, states can only do a part of the job. The rest needs to be taken on charge by non-state actors, which is business, civil society organizations, big academic institutions, cities, and subnational entities. Unsurprisingly, you will find that what we call the Digital Stability Board, for the purpose of a proposition, is composed with these sort of actors. No? And I remember working a lot when I was much younger on fighting against HIV/AIDS in various positions. If you look at how the Global Fund board is composed, this is very similar. Not much to do between digitalization and HIV/AIDS, but the way it can work to find solutions, there is a parentality. And this is this multi-actor coalition, not without states, but with also other than states, which in our view is the best possibility, according to us, and this is now going to go to a public debate, to avoid what we believe is a globalization with firewalls is not the right way to go. Thanks for your attention. We have Alexander with us in case there are questions which go beyond my or Bruno's expertise, and his expertise is much bigger than mine, so I will easily pass the baton to others in case there are too technical questions. Over to you for questions. Questions around this table? Go ahead.
Actually, my name is Maya Plants. I'm the editor-in-chief of the UN Brief. It's really a pleasure to see you all again. And I'm curious how you're going to launch this idea now in the G20. Is there any specific plan already of the Digital Stability Board?
At this stage, we tabled the proposals. And according to experience, before some of them fly or float, depending on whether you see ideas with wings or depends. It will take a bit of time. We need this to be absorbed by a public debate within the digital industry, that's a big one, with civil society, which may have different views on where digitalization should go than Meta or Huawei, who are both sponsors of this study, together with Qualcomm and Vodafone. And we also need regulators to step in and see whether what we recommend on each of the 4 areas makes sense. So far, to answer your question, Maya, we do not have a sort of lobbying plan ready. We are putting the thing on the table. Paris Peace Forum is a good occasion to do that because of the parentality, which I tried to explain. Other presentations will probably take place elsewhere in Europe, in China, and in the US in the coming times. So that's the plan for the moment.
Perhaps if I may add, the reason for this report is also to call upon governments to perhaps pause a minute and to see, look at the dynamics which is taking place. If we don't do anything, we're going to go to major issues, major discrepancies major problems everywhere. And that's why we say, let's hold a sec, and let's see what can be done. And that's going to be the message after we have delivered the baby, that we are going to say and to be available to explain in Europe, in the United States, in China, elsewhere, because there were also colleagues from Brazil, from Singapore, who participated in this production. And we would like government to realize that there may be another way. That's what is, that the way the tectonic plates are working for the moment, and not necessarily in the right direction.
Other questions, if any? Yes, please.
Oh, yeah, okay, here. Oh, sorry. You reminded us of the different... Oh, sorry, I'm Ines. Ines, I'm a student. Thank you for the presentation. You reminded us of the different ways of seeing data according to different countries and regions, such as like the US as merchandise and the EU or China. And so I was wondering what were the main points where you, when you were working together, found like common ground to work on and like things that you can like agree on together to make it move forward in such a divided vision?
My part of the answer will be very short. It's not just the question whether US or EU or China see things the same way. EU, US, China, meaning the US government, the EU government, governance, and China. This is the sort of, I hope I'm not offending anybody, but this is the narrow view of the problem. The issue lies in the relationship and the cooperation and the engagement of a much wider group of stakeholders. Of course, there are differences in the way, let's say, to put it simply, US, EU, China all want to protect data privacy. They all have a legislation on data privacy. And by the way, if you look at the principles of these legislations, including in China, they're not very different. The Chinese legislation is about protecting data privacy. The reality is that it doesn't exactly work the same way. Otherwise, global tech companies would have the same foothold on China, Europe, and the US regulatory-wise. This is not the case. A number of big tech companies have retreated or invested here or there as a function of what they see is a difference that creates a problem for them. So that's the issue. The notion that you have to create a level playing field for socks or shirts, we've had that for 50 years, and it has worked reasonably well. A shirt north-west, east-west is roughly the same. Its cost of production is now reasonably similar. This is not the case with digital goods or services for the reasons which Bruno mentioned. So what we are trying to do with this is deep dive into the motivations, the reason, the rationale of these different actors. What they have in mind is, for each of them, what digitalization should bring as benefit. And it's a very diverse thing, and it's a thick report. And the reason why it's a thick report is it's a very complex issue. So I don't have a simple solution to your answer. I know there are differences. We can see that, for instance, in what the US and the EU are trying to do with this Trade and Tech Council. We can see that with various dialogues the EU has with the Chinese, less for the moment, between US and China. So far, there, nothing like the emergence of what we try to propose, which is a global digital ecosystem with convergence where it is possible, and coexistence where, for good reasons, this convergence is not possible.
Just perhaps coming back to what you said about data, just to give you an example of what we recommend. Our colleagues who have worked on the data work stream have realized that, the divergences that we see in data and privacy regimes, those have to be accepted. I mean, we cannot just say with a magic magician stick say they should disappear. But what is possible, perhaps, is to develop a system of mutual recognition to enable the transfer of data, probably non-personal data, between regimes when it's possible. And we suggest that in the same way as we've been doing it at the EU level with the adequacy approach, we should try to perhaps aim at mutual recognition and try to test that at global level when precisely, and as is the case of data, direct harmonization of preferences is not something which is credibly on the agenda. And of course, they should not prevent these kind of mutual recognition rules to take account of the fact that the transfer of particularly sensitive data may remain subject to more restrictive conditions, for instance, in the case of genomic data. But we see that these issues are not only issues between the very East, the Far East, and the West. These are issues that we are discussing between Europe and the United States. I think that we see that the discussions which are taking place on the privacy shield between the US and Europe are moving in a good direction. So there is a way, and that's what we're saying. Let's try to go deeper in that direction.
Other questions? Go ahead.
Okay, I have just a quick follow-up question on this. I'm Andrea, I'm a student too, and I'm just curious about your views on, I mean, at the end, the regulation is just a matter of national preferences, but how can we just take away the geopolitical tensions, even in a crucial sector such as the digital economy? How can we remove the importance of national preferences, and how can we avoid that actually countries, these huge blocs, use the regulatory power to impose their national standards over the others?
In this area, national, let's say, local or regional in the case of Europe, collective preferences matter. They don't matter for socks and shirts. The color may matter, but that's not a problem. In this field, collective preferences matter because they are linked to deep beliefs which have been shaped by history, culture, religions, philosophy, geography. And the notion that you can level the playing field in this area like you do it for shirts or even cars doesn't work. So we have to start from the recognition that in cases where these collective preferences are legitimately different, it's about coexistence and not about convergence. And organizing this coexistence is necessary. And what Bruno said about, for instance, mutual recognition is one possible way, although mutual recognition is based on the principle that the reasons why you regulate and the reason why I regulate are roughly the same. We may want to do it differently for a variety of reasons, but fundamentally, I mean, that's what happened in Europe with the internal market. A lot of what leveled the playing field within the European internal market is not harmonization. A lot of that came from mutual recognition, you know, when a European court said that the beer that was good for the Belgians and for the Germans could be good the other way around. And that was a big step forward. Now, data is not beer. So we need to recognize this and then pay more attention to the modalities of coexistence so that we limit the non-convergence. That's the fundamental idea.
Just to add, you ask very, very rightly, you say, but, you know, if we cannot develop common standards because, or common rules because of our values, I would say that the rules that will come over will be the result of both our values, but also our interests. And it's the intersections between values and interests which will determine the way we're going to go. And this is not very easy, because what is at stake here? It's the benefits which you can draw and share from a relatively open, cross-border digital economy, and balance this with the protection of public policy objectives. And this is the very narrow thread, you know, the very narrow path on which each government, each regional institution has to thread, sorry.
Okay, let's take last question. Please go ahead.
I'm Melanie. I work at Goodly Labs as COO Public Editor. We're working on trying to embed media literacy into the news so that there can be more coexistence of similar thoughts. I was wondering, do you have anything you're planning to do to address global news with this board in terms of like the truth that's seen from different countries so that there can be maybe more convergence and coexistence of the different perspectives that people are presenting on global news?
The answer is not in this piece. There are a number of digital issues, like digital divide, like AI, like cybersecurity at large, which we haven't dealt with in this report intentionally, because we wanted to focus on areas which are complex and which we need specialists to try and explain. This sort of topic which you mentioned is part of other initiatives of the Paris Peace Forum, the Paris Call, the Christchurch Call, protection of children on internet, media freedom on social networks. We have initiatives, we've been doing that for the last 5 years, in a number of areas, including trying to connect the necessity to protect the freedom of press in places where it is stressed through proper funding of digital systems. So this is part of our digital universe. We don't have a cathedral. We don't have a big digital treaty. After 5 years of existence of the Paris Peace Forum, we have a series of building blocks. And the one you mentioned is part of this, but not in this piece.
Since we are coming to an end, I wouldn't leave without paying a tribute to the group of people who have done this work, and today they're represented, I think, by Professor Alexandre de Streel, who's academic director at CERRE. So I think their work has been really, really awesome. There's been a fantastic work, and I'd like to publicly pay tribute to them. Thank you, Alexandre.
So, Alexander, we saved you from a terribly difficult technical question, but we are happy that you were on that screen because there's a lot of people behind Bruno and myself, and you are their representative tonight, so many thanks for being with us online. Bye.